All right, hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. And we are in Acts chapter 2, and I don't know if I just said that, but anyway, Acts chapter 2, and we're moving through the birth of the church, the early church, and Peter's first message, his first preaching. Now, this preaching came as a result of um, being filled with the Holy Spirit and then speaking in other tongues. Okay, and so um, um, which Jesus had told them, "I'm sending you out to preach to the world. But before you go, I want you to be endured with power from high." So this happened in chapter 2. They spoke in tongues. The speaking in tongues, the speaking in tongues in this um in this group here, all right, the speaking in tongues is it was the purpose was a sign. People saw that the crowds that were crowded in Jerusalem, okay, the crowds that were crowded in Jerusalem, for they actually were there for the feast, and then they were crowded in Jerusalem. They heard Peter and them speaking in other tongues, and when they heard them speaking in other tongues, they also heard them speaking the mighty acts, the wonderful acts of God. So this was a sign. It got their attention, as we will see that the sign gifts, the miracles, the healings, serve primarily to get the attention of people. They also validate the the God's spokesman. They validate God's spokesman. Okay, so let's jump in it, and we got into. I'm going to pick it up where I'm going to start at verse 37. I started verse 36 as he's finishing off his preaching. He says, "Therefore let all the house of Israel know with certainty that God has made this Jesus whom you crucified both Lord and Messiah." I'm going to say a thought about the statement here that he's making. One, notice he's speaking to the house of Israel. This was the starting point, ground zero for the gospel. Okay, they kind of kept it there, but we'll deal with that later. But understand that this is who their message is aimed to. And then he says that God has made this Jesus Lord and Messiah. But notice he says, whom you crucified. And oftentimes there is kind of the question that people ask, or some people ask, you could say, who killed Jesus? And then you can be accused of anti-Semitism if you say, well, the Jews killed Jesus. Well, the answer to the question is both Jews and Gentiles through Pontius Pilate, or Rome, you could say, killed Jesus. Rome didn't care, remember. Rome had no dog to hunt, as they say. They didn't care, but it was the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the Sanhedrin, that forced Pilate's hands. They trumped up charges, false charges, and then they and Pilate knew that. So he, I mean, by no means is he innocent, because he knew that Jesus was innocent. He kept saying that Jesus was innocent. So anyway, he says, "Whom you crucified, both Lord and Messiah." And another interesting about the phrase here, Messiah, and I kind of want to. I was going to, and I know I got to change my description, because I don't know if I'm going to get to it. I'll get to some of it, but I want to actually need to clue this. But notice he says that therefore let all of the house of Israel know with certainty that God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Messiah. Now, if you kind of go back, and I said throughout the ministry that the disciples were always questioning Jesus. They were always asking Jesus about the kingdom. Not only were they questioning Jesus about the kingdom, they were also even excited that the Messiah would set up the kingdom. So they were kind of like talking about what they thought, positions they thought they would have in the kingdom. In other words, they would argue among themselves, who was going to be the greatest in the kingdom. Now, what they meant was, let me go to the book of Acts, because I want to kind of show this side by side here. And this will kind of give you an idea, besides the fact that I don't think I have the time to hunt down. I don't think I have the time to hunt down all of the places where they were arguing among themselves about the kingdom. But I think I can sum it up with this. This is moments before Jesus ascends into heaven, which I actually was right there, wasn't I? Okay, so so notice he says, so when they came together, they asked him, Lord, are you restoring the kingdom to Israel at this time? I want you to focus on that question. Are you restoring the kingdom to Israel at this time? And then let me see if I can find it in Luke's gospel. Luke's gospel, because I want you to see something here. I think, do I want to do it in John the Baptist? John the Baptist. Let's see. Now we kind of went through this, but I'm in Luke chapter 1 and going to chapter 2. Here's the birth of Jesus, and then okay, here's the good one. Here is Simeon that comes in, and verse 25 says, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. This man was righteous and devout, looking forward to Israel's consolations. Now notice, he was looking forward to Israel's consolation. I want you to kind of know that. The reason why I say that is because a lot of people were kind of had this anticipation about the Messiah, okay, about the Messiah. And then let me go down and then look at John the Baptist here. Let's see if I can see it right here. John the Baptist. All right, so see, I didn't want to kind of come this way, but what I'm kind of showing is, and we studied these scriptures when we went through Luke, how everyone was kind of musing at the fact. Oh, here it is. Look at verse 15. Now it says, now the people were waiting expectantly, and all of them were debating in their minds whether John would be, now get this, the Messiah. John answered them all, I baptize with water, but one is coming who is more powerful than I, not worthy to untie the strap of his sandals. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. Now he goes on and then actually talks about the uh, what the Messiah would be. And here now Peter is now proclaiming to the house of Israel. He says, therefore know, let all the house of Israel know certainly that God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Messiah. The reason why I'm kind of hanging on this is because, first and foremost, they thought the kingdom, the physical kingdom, was going to appear. They were looking forward to the physical kingdom to appear. So now, post-resurrection, post-ascension into heaven, do they lose faith in Jesus? And the answer is no, because notice he said, even though Jesus did not meet your expectations, in other words, even though he didn't meet your expectations, he is still Lord and Messiah. That's important. Because let's say on another note, you have people that lose faith because tragedy happens to them. You have people who lose faith because of what, or I put it like this, maybe just since this recent failed rapture appearance of September 23rd and 25th, then some people lose faith. So, but the question is that here is the reality that Jesus is Lord. He says, let all the house of Israel know Jesus is Lord and Messiah. So just because he didn't do things the way you wanted him to do things or in expectation doesn't take away from the fact that he is still Messiah. Now, same thing. Let's broaden it. Go back to the place when I just said that let's say a tragedy happens, and then people say, well, if God was such a God, I'm going to lose my faith, but God is such a God. Why did he let this tragedy happen? And to me, when people ask questions like that, it's always funny to me that when people ask questions, that they certainly demonstrate a fundamentally lack of understanding of who the Messiah and what that term means, who God is and what that term means. So because God didn't do what you want him to do, does that mean he's not God? And if he's still God, why do you think you have the arrogance to challenge that? Okay, he didn't save your loved one, but he's still God. God didn't save your loved one. And the reason why I say that, because that's what's coming out in this statement here, that Jesus is Lord, whether you accept him or not, whether you understand it or not. What God has done, and Peter is saying here to the house of Israel, let this be known to the house of Israel that this Jesus whom you crucified. Now he kind of takes a pot shot at him. The crowd who, some of the Pharisees for sure, right? And then some of the people who were there just right in the last festival cycle that were there, that were saying, that were yelling, crucify him, crucify him. He said, the one you crucified is both Lord and Messiah. Both Lord and Messiah. The same Jesus is Lord and Messiah. So I think our starting point always should be that God is God. Jesus is Lord and Messiah. So for them, whether he's demonstrated, and think about this through his life, the miracles, the signs that he came to demonstrate it. So first and foremost, whether he fulfills any of your expectations, what he has demonstrated that he is Lord and Messiah. That is the starting point. Actually the start and the finish. So if he and I think this would be wise to remember is that the very person that you may curse, reject because he did not meet your expectation is the one that you certainly are going to meet in eternity, meaning at your death. Okay? So, verse 37 says, and when they heard this, they came under deep conviction and said to Peter and to the rest of the apostles, brother, what must we do? Now, remember, Jesus said that the Holy Spirit, when the Holy Spirit come, he would bring conviction. Conviction because they believe not on me. Now, some people use that in the generic way, meaning this. You hear Christians say, the Lord convicted me of that. He didn't convict you. Maybe your conscience did. But where the conviction comes, because notice when they heard this, they came under deep convictions. And who knows? Some of them might have came under this conviction. For one, it was by the preaching of the gospel. It was by the preaching of the gospel and the fact that when Peter made the statement, the one you crucified, he is Lord. He is Messiah. I kind of think about, if you go back to the story of Joseph in Genesis, his brothers sold him into slavery, sent him on a 20-year journey, hardships, because first he was sold as a slave, and then he was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and then put in jail. Okay, all right. So think about that. Potiphar put him in jail because his wife accused him, and I had to always wonder and think Potiphar had to have known that his wife was a tramp. He had to know that his wife was a lying cheat. He had to know that. That's why I think, and this is I'm adding here now. Put this on a parenthesis or a sidebar. I'm adding here my opinion. Okay, this is that besides God's providence, understand that besides God's providence in Joseph's life, that the reason why he did not kill him because he knew his wife was a lying cheat. Now, that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion, okay? What we do know for sure is that Joseph was preserved through God's providence, through the hand of God on him, protecting him. Okay. Now, but what's funny is that then he ended up telling a dream by God's providence. And then because of that, he is now exalted to the number two ruler in Egypt. And I think about, how did Potiphar's wife feel about that? How did Potiphar feel about that? We know how his brothers feel about it. He took them through for a minute. So we know how they felt. But I wonder how Potter's, right? And the same thing right here, that these people who over 50 days, so maybe 60 days, and by the way, this was still fresh on their minds. Well, a little over if you count the 50 days and then you count the 40 days in between, his resurrection. It was just that short amount of time when this crowd were yelling, crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. So now, as Peter is speaking, he says they came under deep conviction. We killed the Messiah, right? We killed the Messiah. And now Jesus raised up. Now, and they may be asking, well, what do we what do we do? Can we make this right? Wrath is upon us. We crucified, right, the Messiah. Now, Jesus also said in the message here that he raised up the Messiah for you. So the conviction, yes, and then here comes the gospel message of forgiveness. So they come under conviction by the Holy Spirit. In fact, in the Bible tells us that no one can call Jesus Lord but by the Holy Spirit. All right, I'll pick up with this next time. Didn't mean to go that deep into it, but there it is. All right, we're going to pick up with this and we can get into maybe baptism. Anyway, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome, and I will see you in the next video.